This video is both exciting and nerve-wracking. If you're new here, hi, welcome. I'm Caitlin. I am a 23-year-old writer from Colorado documenting my entire process to becoming a published author. And I thought we would do something fun today. And you've read the titles, so you know what we're doing. I really enjoyed watching these videos and I thought, why not do my own? So without further ado, let's get into it. Last year, I made a really big transfer of all of my work when I realized that some of it might be used to train AI. So I compiled it all into a Scrivener document and I'm glad that I did. However, I did forget to postmark when I wrote these. But for context, this was mostly from like middle school, so keep that in mind. We're gonna start small. The very first piece of writing is, the one thing I wanted more than anything in the world was fairy floss. And Jeremiah Clark, but the fairy floss was more important at the moment. I saw that one and I thought it was really cute, and I do also remember writing most of these. The next piece of writing is from a book I've always wanted to title The Last Frog Summer, and I keep coming back to this one, but I haven't quite figured out the characters or the story, so this will just sit in the drafts until a later date. It's more contemporary, and I've realized through writing more that I don't exactly enjoy writing contemporary. However, this one is still really fun and I still laugh out loud every single time I read it. So, the sun warmed me from within. The top of my skin prickled with fresh sunburn, but the heat kept me from moving much. The breeze, like the water beneath me, warm, offered little relief. Trees sang gently above me as the leaves brushed against each other. Eloisa! My mother's voice echoed off the poolside, but I didn't dare reply, partly because I knew that acknowledging her would admit that I could hear her over the sound of the water lapping in my ears, and partly because I didn't have the energy. Temperatures had reached over 100 these past few days, and besides melting our own air conditioner, the great heat wave of Lakeville seemed to have fried everything in its path. Telephone towers were down, and though the problem had an easy fix, workers were too damn hot to even show up to work. Batteries exploded in mini-powered box fans. Windows were scalding to the touch. Car doors were melting on their frames. I was surprised my pool float hadn't suffered the same fate, though it was looking pretty pathetic and barely kept me afloat. It seemed as if the entire town were weighed down with the heat, making them too hot to even talk. Besides my mother, that is. Eloisa Evans, if you don't come inside right now, I'll have no choice but to... I rolled off my deflated raft and submerged my whole body under the water, face first and limp. I imagined that along with everything else in this town, the heat had killed me senselessly too. My mother did not approve of my little charade. I know this because as I walked past her draped in a towel, she muttered from the porch, Eloisa, I do not approve of your little charade. If there was one thing I was good at, it was disappointing my mother. Yet, at the end of the day, I'm glad I had that, because apparently, at least to her, I had nothing else going for me. That little charade line gets me every time. So for context, the next little bit of scene, she goes upstairs, her mother picks up her towel, even though she says she won't, and then as she's entering her room, her friend is there. They have a little bit of conversation before this, but this was the part that makes me laugh. I think this just proves that I possess more patience than anyone gives me credit for. I mean, I put up with you and my mother, so that's really saying a lot of me. Me? What's wrong with me? Well, for starters, you crawl in through my window without invitation. I wasn't aware that our friendship needed invitation. Not our friendship, just my window. Ellie, saying that I can't crawl through the damn window is like saying I can't use your toothbrush when I'm here. You've been using my toothbrush? Not the point. She stepped past me and into my bathroom. Like, come on, their friendship is so funny. I do think that eventually I will come back to that story because, like I said, I love it. I love the imagery. I love how dramatic Ellie is. I love the friendship that's already started to form. But yeah, as of right now, it's on the back burner and maybe we'll come back in the future. This next little bit is from a book that I also remember starting. It's called Anthill. Again, at the time, I just had vibes and characters. I had no plot. That has since changed a little bit. As you will see, I'm going to read what it was from the very beginning, what came out of me in like middle school, maybe freshman year of high school, if I remember correctly. And then I did pick it back up, I want to say last year around the same time that I did move everything over. And so it has changed significantly, but I just wanted to kind of show you how much it's changed because I was really impressed with just how much I've improved in my writing. From the outside, you would never be able to tell that hiding away in that little corner house was the most wanted teen in town. Eli's boots made a clicking sound on the new hardwood floor as he walked through the empty house. All that the previous family had left behind was a cheap, plastic-covered couch and ugly yellow wallpaper. "Marco!" No answer. Eli continued through the house, letting his hand run along the wall behind him. "Marco!" His voice echoed along with the clicking of his heels, a sweet symphony. Eli walked through to the kitchen. Still no sign of Marco. He rounded the corner and advanced the staircase. At the top, he noticed the attic rope was still swinging gently back and forth. "Gotcha," he whispered, tugging at the rope and moving back to make room for the folding stairs. "It wasn't funny when we were kids, Eli. It's not funny now." Marco scoffed at the other boy as he pulled himself up into the attic. "Were you trying to hide from me, Marco?" "Yes, Polo, just like the rest of this goddamn town." "Kind of ironic, isn't it?" Eli laughed, tugging the rope taut so that the stairs folded up behind him again. "That an entire town is playing Marco Polo." Marco turned to look out the window like he had been before he was interrupted. Eli joined him on the wooden chest that was pushed flush against the opposite wall. "Why are you here, Eli?" Marco asked after taking a long drag of his cigarette. Eli held his hand out for the end, and Marco handed it over without hesitating. Marco watched as Eli took his sweet time blowing the smoke at the small, round window of the attic. "Corbin's been talking about you," he said with a final burst of air and handed the cigarette back. "The entire town has been talking about me." Marco sighed, biting the cigarette between his front teeth before pushing the sleeves of his jacket up to his elbows. "No thanks to him." "It wasn't like that," Eli argued, taking the cigarette again. "I was there too, Eli," he snapped. "Corbin knew what he was doing. He knew what would happen." "I think you're over-exaggerating." Another puff of smoke out the window. "Have you talked to him since?" Marco shot him a glare. "Do you think I've talked to him since?" Eli handed the cigarette back over, and Marco snatched it out of his hand to make a point. "You should talk to him, Marco." Okay, that was the first bit. This next bit, so much better. The stench of newly blooming magnolias assaulted Eli's nostrils. Summer and its subsequent gossip about him and his best friend was upon his small town sooner than he would have liked. He kicked a stray sidewalk rock back into its median and shoved his fists further into his coat pockets, which, if anyone asked, was acceptable to still be wearing, as it hadn't even hit 70 degrees yet, and the coast was cold in the early mornings regardless. He was usually the only one walking at this time of day, and usually he had nowhere to go, but this morning was an exception, as he headed to a most inconspicuous house on an abandoned block. Row after row of houses, each terraformed lawn yellowed and overrun with weeds and dotted with foreclosed signs. From the outside, you would never be able to tell that hiding away in one of the little corner houses was the most wanted teenager in town. Eli's boots clicked on the forgotten hardwood floor, new at the time, but since dusted with sand. A few spots were still bare, the packages of flooring torn but the project unfinished, as if the crew were coming back from lunch any minute now, leaving Eli to pick up his toes lest they catch on a ledge and he fall. Eli stopped at the bottom of the stairs. "Marco," he called. No answer. He advanced the staircase, letting his hand drag on the yellowing wallpaper behind him. "Marco," he sung this time, letting the vowels exaggerate themselves. It was an easy and rehearsed tune that echoed through the empty house. But it wasn't empty, was it? At the top, he noticed the attic rope in the middle of the hallway. He might have brushed past it, even given up on his search, if it weren't for the slightest of swinging. Gotcha. Eli tugged on the rope and stepped back, making way for the stairs to unfold before him, and began climbing. "It wasn't funny when we were kids, Eli, and it's not funny now." Eli chuckled to himself. He knew better than to take offense at Marco's scolding. It was just how he said hello. "You weren't trying to hide from me, were you?" "Yes, Polo. You and the rest of this goddamn town." Marco turned to look out the window, which was so caked in dust and cigarette smoke that he could only barely make out the shapes of other houses. Despite his wanting, Eli took the seat next to him on the wooden workbench he had claimed that morning. "Kind of ironic, isn't it, that the entire town is now playing one giant game of Marco Polo?" Eli grinned in an attempt to ease the tension. It was his worst habit, joking at inappropriate times. But Marco was no longer fazed. That's why the two of them worked so well. Eli's gaze softened as Marco took a long drag of his cigarette, the butt end lighting orange for a moment before fizzling back into darkness. Eli gave a nudge, his fingers open and wanting. He didn't need to say anything for Marco to hand it over. "Why are you here?" It came out in a long blow of smoke. Eli tapped the ashes out before taking a drag himself. "Corbin won't shut up about you," Eli smiled. smoke escaping from his nostrils and between his grin. The whole town won't shut up about me. Marco pushed the sleeves of his jacket up around his elbows. The sun was beginning to peek in. Eli kept his down, on principle. No thanks to him. It wasn't like that. I was there too. Corbin knew what he was doing. He knew what would happen. I think you're over-exaggerating. Have you tried talking to him? Do you think I've tried talking to him? Marco snatched for the cigarette, but in one swift motion, Eli dropped it to the floor and stomped it under his boot. Don't think I'm condoning your bad habits again. You should talk to him. Just get blinded. Well, what did you guys think? I had a lot of fun reading it. I have so many more little snippets of writing that I could read, so if you guys enjoyed this video, please like it and let me know if you want to see more. I don't really know exactly how to close this out or if I should be giving any sort of thoughts, but the only thoughts that I do have is that the more you practice writing, the easier it becomes, but it's also super important to be reading in your genre. That is how I learned certain imagery, certain tropes. Things just come more naturally once you start consuming more of the media that you want to produce. I also think it's funny to see that my style of writing hasn't changed much from when I began writing. I've been writing my whole entire life, but I seriously started writing around 14. That is when I finished my very first ever full-length book. Technically it is a fan fiction, but if I were to pitch it today, it would be a retelling and no one would know. But I do remember getting comments on that work of people saying that they really enjoyed my prose and sort of how I wrote. And again, I haven't changed my style of writing very much since then. I still love the M-dash. I love putting thoughts and emotion and other certain sort of things that are happening in the scene within that. But yeah, I am really excited for you all to hopefully one day soon read the novel that I am currently working on. As again, it has surprised me that my prose has not changed significantly since I started writing at 14. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to follow along. Like I said, I am documenting my entire process, and you can watch these videos here where I talk about the very first spark of an idea and where I am currently in the process. Alrighty, I will see you all in the next one. Happy writing.